What I'm going to do is I'm going to give just an overview of what happened, and then I'm going to defer to the chief too for the activities that occurred in Franklin, Mass, which brought this to a resolution where we ended up having two subjects that were apprehended. So at about 2:30 this morning, patrol officers responded to a report of a robbery in progress at a multifamily home on Blackstone Street here in Woonsocket. The responding officers later learned that inside that apartment was a 29 and a 21-year-old male resident who were asleep when the door was kicked in and the apartment was entered by two individuals that were armed, and they were robbed at gunpoint after they were duct taped. Our responding officers responding to the call, when they pulled up towards the front of the residence, observed two suspects running from that residence up Blackstone Street. Officers engaged in a brief foot pursuit, but those individuals made it around the corner to a waiting vehicle that was running with an operator in the vehicle, and they jumped in the vehicle and began to flee from the area. A second, or actually it would be a third responding Woonsocket officer came almost into a collision with them as they were leaving, which began the pursuit that went through the city of Woonsocket for some distance, crossed into the Massachusetts, over the Massachusetts state line to Massachusetts Street, as I believe is what it is, Washington Street, into Massachusetts, where it ultimately crashed in Franklin, Mass. The individuals that were in that vehicle at the crash, and it was a substantial crash, airbags were deployed, they fled the vehicle into the woods. Within a short period of time after the crash, assisted by Franklin police responded, as well as numerous other units from Massachusetts and some responding Woonsocket units, one of the individuals surrendered himself to police and was immediately taken into custody. That subject, the first one that was apprehended, you have his information, is that Jerome Lopes from Brockton, Mass. He was transported by rescue to be examined, went to Landmark Hospital back here in Woonsocket, and then after being examined was taken into custody by Woonsocket police, and he's currently here at the Woonsocket police station waiting to be arraigned or waiting to be taken to court on charges regarding this incident. After that had occurred, the perimeter of that area where the crash was contained by members of the Franklin, Mass. Police Department, as well as numerous other surrounding police departments, as well as the local, or I should say the Metro Regional, I believe they call it Mass LEC, or Mass what, and I'll let the chief speak to that. After an extensive search, they were there in the woods for hours doing grid searches and getting some information from people in the neighborhood, because there were some alerts that were put out. A second individual was found hiding in the woods, and he's identified as Joshua Gonzalez. And he was taken to a Mass hospital for examination. I'll let the chief speak to that, and he's currently in the custody of Franklin police, and we're working with them to figure out what extradition is going to be to bring him back here to Rhode Island and to Woonsocket to answer to the charges. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Lynch.
Thank you, Chief. As the chief explained, the pursuit ended up in Franklin on our Washington Street 700 area, with the corner of Washington Street, Sheila Lane is where the accident occurred. The vehicle hit a telephone pole. Two of the individuals, after the first had, voluntarily given himself up, had absconded themselves into the woods. So our officers ended up doing a perimeter and held it until the Metropolitan Law Enforcement Council's Metro Star SWAT team could arrive. So about 60 of those officers ended up coming in. We waited for daylight. We tightened up the perimeter, and eventually those 911, reverse 911 calls that we made, both through our own system and the Mass Emergency Management Agency, MEMA system, to all cell phones in the area, we started getting calls from residents, especially on Sheila Lane, that they were seeing individuals moving around in the woods. It wasn't us. And then eventually the individual knocked on a door looking for assistance. So we tightened the perimeter, and we were able to capture that individual. The third suspect, we continued to look for several hours. We do not believe that individual is in the area any longer, but we're working with Woonsocket and other members of the Metro ISU unit, Investigative Services unit, to try to investigate and see, if we can obtain further information on that person and hopefully, capture them at some point in time.